How's it going, vaqueros, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the weird stepchild of the shotgun category, and that is the Expedite 12. This thing hits like a semi-auto, but shoots about as fast as a pump action, and it's got this really awkward feel to it, and honestly, this gun is pretty weird in a lot of ways, but there is some utility to it, and I want to shine some light on this gun and give it the light that it deserves, but also I want to talk about a lot of the downsides. But with today's video, I'm going to give you guys the class setup you need to try. Let me know if it works for you. I'll leave timestamps below in the description, and then we'll talk about the gun itself and kind of the quirks it has, and maybe if it's even worth using at all over something like the KV Broadside. So if that sounds good to you, let's go ahead and get right into it. First off, here is the class that I've been using with some pretty decent success. As you can see, we're not rocking a barrel. None of these barrels really give you any damage range unless you tune them. There is one barrel that does give you a 10-round tube, which is nice, but it does block your muzzle attachment, so that's up to you if you want to use it. I prefer using a choke instead and not using any barrel, since we don't really get any range boosts. Then I'm using the .G3P laser. That's to get a nice hip fire spread. This is a semi-auto, so typically I like to kind of hip fire these things and get in someone's face. Then we have the resonance stock collapsed stock, and this thing is going to help you with your mobility overall. Then we have the Expedite elbow and the 12 gauge Dragon's Breath. These are both essential. You really want to have these two. Dragon's Breath is really nice, and the Expedite elbow is also really effective in helping that time to kill. Now the thing about Dragon's Breath is it turns this shotgun into a 2-shot kill. So essentially this turns the gun into what the KV Broadside used to be with its 2-shot kill, but of course it doesn't shoot nearly as fast, and as we'll see soon, that is kind of an issue. But yes, you can 2-shot kill with the Expedite using Dragon's Breath. Now unfortunately, it isn't a 2-shot immediate death. In other words, it's not 2 shots and then they die. It's 2 shots and then there's a burn from Dragon's Breath, and then the burn is what ends up killing the enemy. And unfortunately, this does hurt your time to kill by a little bit. So it's not an immediate time to kill. Again, you have to wait for the burn to kick in. And if you compare that to the 3-shot now of the KV Broadside after its nerf, unfortunately, it looks like the KV Broadside still does in fact kill a little bit quicker than the Expedite by about 150 milliseconds, and that's measured by hand, and that is at 60 frames per second. But it does deal a hell of a punch up close with that 2-shot Dragon's Breath. Of course, you just have to let the burn kick in, but yes, it still does some pretty good damage, so there is some utility to this gun. But unfortunately, in terms of its upsides, that's kind of where it falls flat, because again, comparing to something like the KV Broadside, they have very comparable range, and they have very comparable damage. Of course, the Expedite can 2-shot, but it still has a time to kill slower, at least practically, than the KV Broadside. One of the other big issues is the magazine size and the reload speed. This thing only has a 7-round tube by default. A lot of attachments in the barrel side take it down to 5. One of them takes it up to 10, which is nice, but considering the reload speed, which is incredibly slow and it's shell by shell, it falls flat in so many ways. Again, comparing to its closest counterpart, the KV Broadside, where basically it's a magazine. You can have 12, 8, or even 25, which is ridiculous, and it reloads pretty damn fast for how many shells it can hold. And honestly, this shell-by-shell reload can be a deal breaker for some people in quads or maybe even trios. Another really important thing to note about this gun is it's just sort of awkward. Maybe this is more of a subjective thing, but this gun is a little quirky and awkward to handle. Again, it's because it's in this weird state of being a hybrid between sort of a pump action that shoots fast and a semi-auto that shoots a little bit slower but deals a little bit more damage. It's just in this weird state. It's very similar to the Vanguard Einhorn revolving shotgun that was in Warzone 1 as well as Vanguard. It has that awkward feel, but in Warzone, this thing just, in my opinion, falls a little bit flat again compared to the other shotguns. As its own sort of thing, it is still useful, and this build that I showed you guys is still fun, and people will definitely be caught off guard by it, and yes, it still will kill faster than some SMGs up close, so it's not like it's a useless shotgun. It's just that compared to the others, it kind of falls flat, and it needs to have its own identity more, especially when you're comparing it to something like the KV Broadside. So I don't want to turn this into just a KV Broadside is better than Expedite type of video and just crap all over the Expedite 12, not at all, but unfortunately, because of the nature of the guns, it kind of starts to turn into that just because of the whole advantage that the KV Broadside has over this gun. That being said, I want to offer some ways that this gun could be just a little bit better, and this is primarily for devs that might be listening in or anything like that, but we don't want this to become an oppressive shotgun since it is semi-auto. Nobody likes the semi-auto shotgun metas. We want this to be strong but not oppressive. So keeping that in mind, some ways you could help with this gun are making sure that the reload speed is a little bit faster. If it's going to be shell by shell, bump it up just a little bit because currently it is way too slow. Another thing you could do is to help mitigate the recoil a little bit more. I know that sounds weird on a shotgun, but this thing kicks like a mule, especially for things like slugs or when you're aiming down sights. You do not want to aim down sights with this gun, really, just because it kicks so much. And it's not as bad as the Gracie Auto was in Warzone 1, but this thing does kick. And if you want to use slugs with it, well, good luck. Because again, it's just really hard to hit your follow-up shots. And this thing, you really need to hit your follow-up shots. And the KV Broadside slugs are just better in pretty much every way. And the last thing you could do is just give this thing a little bit more of a range boost. Its 2-shot range is basically out to the same range as the KV Broadside's 3-shot. And in my opinion, it needs to be a little bit better. It needs to be a little bit further. I think currently it sits at about that 4.1 meter mark with Dragon's Breath. So in my opinion, I would say tune that up just a little bit. Maybe take it out to 5.5, maybe just a little bit past that. That way it's got a little bit more going for it, and it's carrying that damage a little bit further than the KV Broadside is. And even though this has a slower fire rate, it's going to be able to do a little bit more damage to enemies. Overall, this thing is not a bad shotgun. It's just compared to the others, I think it's falling flat in a lot of ways, especially compared to the KV Broadside. So really, I think this gun could use some love. But I do think it still has some utility. Like I said, it should still be able to kill a lot of SMGs quicker than those SMGs up close, so you can still catch people off guard, but there's a lot of downsides to it too, and it's really not worth the risk in a lot of ways. And honestly, I'd probably be better off using something like the Bryson 800, since that's got a lot more reliability and range and damage, and it's just better in a lot of ways, except for maybe the fire rate. That being said though, guys, I want to know down below, what do you guys think of this shotgun? Do you agree with me in that it needs a little bit of love? Do you think it's perfect where it's at, or do you think it maybe even needs a nerf? And with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next shotgun video.